Thank you for holding and attending today's viaTalk. Great turnout. Today we're going to talk about jailbreaking in iOS, which I know, both in forensics and outside of forensics as well is a key topic. We use it a lot here, not only in forensics but in our mobile security testing as well. And it's important to understand what it is and why you want it or why you don't. So as a reminder, use the hashtag viaTalks on Twitter. We'll be monitoring that hashtag for any questions that you might send, so make sure that you send those, and we'll try to get to them at the end if we can. We also post at that hashtag all of the recordings, and then any clips. We try to break it down into minute or 2 minute segments so you can see an archive of all the clips that we have, both at that Twitter hashtag and on our YouTube page as well. Today's presenter is Katie Strzempka. She's our Director of Mobile Services here at viaForensics, and she spends a lot of her days working with the team that does a lot of our mobile security assessments. She's also the author of the Distinguished title iPhone and iOS Forensics, is a certified computer examiner, and I will hand it over to her. Take it away, Katie.
Great, thank you for the intro, Kevin. So this talk is following on from the viaTalk a few weeks back, which was on rooting in Android. And so today we're going to focus on jailbreaking for iOS. We're going to cover, here's a high-level agenda of what we'll cover. We're going to cover the jailbreaking process and what it actually does, at what point in the iOS boot chain is it applied, and most importantly, how it can be leveraged for forensic data recovery and security testing. So as an intro, we want to first define what is jailbreaking. Jailbreaking first originated with the first generation iPhone before the iTunes App Store even existed, which allowed folks to download applications onto their device. Since iOS is a closed environment and is locked down to the iTunes App Store, even with the release of the App Store, users still wanted to access applications that weren't signed by Apple. So jailbreaking is basically a hack that allows running of untrusted code on the device, and untrusted meaning the code is not authorized by Apple. And what jailbreaking does is provides privileged access to the device, which we're going to get into later in this viaTalk, but we're going to talk about how jailbreaking can give you the ability to forensically recover more data and the ability to perform a deeper analysis of the device and the apps on the device. A quick slide just to show you some of the common jailbreak methods. Some of these you may have heard, some of you maybe not. The most recent for the iOS 7 versions that are out there is Pengu. Evasion was another popular one for iOS 6 and early iOS 7, and then there's lots of others out there for the earlier versions and also some less common ones that will apply maybe to very specific OS versions. Red Snow and Yellow Snow are names, as well as Green Poison, and there are some others out there as well. This is probably the most important thing to understand when trying to figure out whether or not jailbreaking is something that you might want to do from a forensic or security analysis perspective. The diagram that you're looking at here is what we're referring to as the iOS chain of trust, starting with the boot ROM and ending with the actual apps that are installed on the device. So historically, jailbreaking tools can be achieved by really breaking this chain of trust at any of these steps shown above. For much older devices, so devices iPhone 4 and earlier, as well as iPad 1 and earlier, I should also mention, there was an exploit available for the boot ROM, which is that first step shown in the diagram. And this allowed breaking the trust at the very beginning, which allowed us to do things like bypass the passcode, which we'll talk about quite a bit throughout this viaTalk here. Since the boot ROM is read-only and cannot be updated, iOS updates to the device didn't kill the exploit. And what this meant was that all devices up to including iPhone 4 and iPad 1 were vulnerable and could be jailbroken regardless of the iOS version that we're running. So because the chain of trust, again, was broken before any iOS code actually runs on the device, it was possible to boot a custom kernel and custom RAM disk. And this is how some of the forensic tools in the past were able to perform physical acquisitions regardless of a pin lock, is because they were able to access through the boot ROM there, access through DFU mode on the device, which we will get into more details in a couple of slides here, and essentially not care about the pin code and just do a physical acquisition of the device. Now, in more recent devices, so iPhone 4S and later and iPad 2 and later, Apple fixed this vulnerability. So there are no longer jailbreaks that can apply at the boot RAM level, but instead these jailbreak methods nowadays are attacking the running kernel on the device. And so the chain of trust before the kernel remains intact, so it's really not possible to load a custom kernel in RAM disk as it was possible in the past. So basically what this means is we can't do a jailbreak unless we know the passcode. So this slide kind of breaks down what I said into a little bit more detail. Again, on older versions, the passcode was able to be bypassed, but as of iPhone 4S, you could only jailbreak if the PIN is disabled or known. Some other requirements that are involved are physical access to the device. There are some remote exploits out there for past versions, but nowadays you really need physical access to the device and remove the passcode in order to do a jailbreak. Some of you who maybe this is the first time you've heard of jailbreak, maybe you don't understand how it works. There's tools out there, and what you basically do is you connect the phone that you want to jailbreak, you click through the tools, and basically it runs everything behind the scenes. And once a jailbreak occurs, it installs an app called Cydia. And what this Cydia app does is really allows users to install and run on unauthorized third-party applications. So you could kind of think of it as the jailbreak version of the iTunes App Store. But instead of just applications, it has various packages also that allow you to perform a deeper forensic or security analysis of the device or the apps running on the device. So let's look at this from a forensic perspective, right? So on older devices, jailbreaking to recover more data was really a more viable option, right? If you got a device that was pin locked, maybe it was a 3GS, let's say, or an iPhone 3, you really didn't care what the pin was. You would put the device in something called DFU mode. You would boot the RAM disk, which was what we talked about earlier. You'd replace it with a hacked version. And you can do a physical acquisition of the device and get access to all the data without even knowing the user's PIN. We also had the ability to brute force the PIN, and if you wanted to actually enter it and look at the data on the phone itself. But we had really all of these options on older devices, and it didn't affect the user data partition because it was, again, modifying that at that boot RAM level. And so fast forwarding to our newer devices, again, 4S or later, really jailbreaking for forensic analysis is really less practical. For one, it requires knowing the device passcode, and so I have that little chicken and egg image down there, which is what came first. You have to jailbreak to brute force the passcode, but you also need the passcode to jailbreak. So kind of a catch there. Continuing on with jailbreak for forensics. Again, there are some pros and cons. Really, the pro for current devices is that you can get access to a little bit more data. I'm going to expand on that in the next slide. I show you a screenshot of the difference. But with the latest encryption that Apple's doing on iOS 4 and later, you can't even use a technique called file carving, which was really the major benefit of getting a physical image in the past, was that we could file carve, recover deleted photos, deleted videos, and basically get access to that unallocated data after the user removed it. So really, from a forensic perspective on the later devices, since we can no longer do file carving, jailbreaking in order to get a physical image will get you a few more files, but not nearly as much as we used to be able to get. And so the cons, there's a few cons. One is potential recovery loop issues. So this has happened to me once or twice. It's not real common, but if something goes wrong in the jailbreak process, I've seen a device go into what's called a recovery loop. And if you guys can picture the logo maybe that you see when you first need to activate an iPhone, there's that Connect to iTunes logo. It kind of gets stuck on that screen to the point where even when you force a restart, it restarts but goes right back into that logo. So you can't boot the device up in a normal way. Kind of forces you to do a format and an update, and therefore you lose all your data. So again, this isn't a common issue, but it's something to consider as a risk. And going along with that, another con is that since it's no longer applied at the boot RAM level, it's not technically forensically sound. So it is touching that user data partition, It's going to install that Cydia app, and basically you need to document and really think about what it's doing on the device, since it's touching that user data partition now instead of just that system partition. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, the cons are that file carving is no longer an option because of that latest encryption. Going back to the Pro that I talked about, logical versus physical. So if you just do a logical acquisition or maybe a backup of your device, you get some of the good data. So on the left-hand side there, you can see the library folder, the media folder, and what that contains is really every application that's installed by default on your device. You'll get access to that information, that existing file system there. You'll also get access to third-party apps that are installed, but you'll have limited access to the files that are actually stored locally. To be a little more specific on that, when you download a third-party app, it creates an application folder, and of course there's nested files and folders within that application folder. Specifically, there's a caches folder that could potentially store a lot of information about that app. That caches folder can only be recovered from a physical image or from a jailbroken device. It's not going to be recovered through an iTunes backup or logical, for example. So you'll get a good amount of data. You'll get your text message database. You'll get your pictures that are still existing on the phone, but you're not going to get what you see on the right there, which is the full file system that exists on the device. So if you have a phone that's already jailbroken and you want to do forensic recovery, or let's say you have the passcode to the phone and you want to jailbreak the device to recover data from it, you will get those files shown on the right-hand side there, which is the full file system on the device. But again, I want to reiterate that on these newer devices, 4S or later, you're not going to be able to file carve. You're not going to be able to get pictures or files that the user deleted, like we're able to do historically on iOS devices. Switching gears just a little bit, it's one thing to get a piece of evidence to forensically examine and say, I'm not going to take the risk and jailbreak this phone to get data, but one thing that we do strongly recommend is if you're doing security testing. So I'm sure we have some forensic folks on the webinar, we have some security analysts on the webinar. So for the security analysts out there, we strongly recommend jailbreaking your test devices to do security testing. As we kind of talked about already, you have limited access to devices because of the way Apple is locking them down. So you have limited access to the device as well as the apps on the device when it's not jailbroken. So by jailbreaking your test device, you could do a much deeper security analysis of your apps. Not only is more data recovered forensically, like we've already talked about, but you could run additional tests like memory recovery, what we call runtime analysis. So basically, you're going to hook into the application while the application is running and interact directly with it, and see how it's working, and see if from a hacker's perspective, if they can modify the app and make it do something that it shouldn't be doing. So really, in summary, it allows for a much more thorough security analysis of an app, and the reason we recommend this is because we think that apps should be analyzed and should be developed in a secure way regardless of the environment they're running on. We get from our clients, we get a lot of questions about, well, a lot of our users probably won't have jailbroken devices, and we say, that's true, but there's a percentage of them that will, and really all it takes is one person. So regardless of if you think the environment's secure, maybe you're running in an MDM and you think that's protecting your apps. There have been studies out there, we've done some of them that have proven otherwise, and we think that each layer of the security process needs to be protected. So not only the device, making sure it's secure, or the environment the device is running in, but also at the app layer in the event that all of those other layers of the perimeter are bypassed. And so I wanted to kind of mention viaExtract, as that is one of our forensic products. Right now it says Android, full physical file system, logical, and backup, but I wanted to mention, since we're focusing on iOS forensics today and jailbreaking iOS devices, that iOS will be integrated in the next release. There are 15-day trials available. There's a community edition, which is coming soon, which we'll be talking about next week. But I really wanted to mention this as I think a lot of those on the line might be interested in forensics as well. And so that was a quick overview of jailbreaking. I wanted to leave some time. I know this is a hot topic, and I wanted to make sure we had some time to cover questions. So if you guys want to go ahead and submit your questions through the webinar right now, we'll start going through those.
Thanks, Katie. And just to mention, we've had a small issue with our system that is viewing the questions there. So we're not able to get to those right now, the ones that were submitted through there. So if you can submit yours through the hashtag viaTalks on Twitter, and we can get to them, or we'll take a look at any that were submitted through the chat window here, and we'll try to post responses to everyone that we can online at a later date. Wanted to reiterate what Katie was talking about just there a second ago. If you're interested in seeing, it's something that we've said previously, and it's something that we really believe in, having root or having jailbreak when you're doing security testing, and knowing exactly what that can do for somebody's ability to acquire data from your app, whether it's on the forensic side or if it's on the security side. I highly recommend checking out our CEO, Andrew Hogue, did a talk called Learn to Love the Root a few weeks back in one of our viaTalks. The recording is out there on our YouTube page, so check that out. He talks about a little bit more detail about why that is. We talk about root, which is Android, but the concepts very much translate to iOS as well. Without further ado, I will let Katie take back over.
Okay, great. It looks like a couple have come in so far through that channel. I'm going to start off with this one as it applies kind of to what Kevin was just saying and what we discussed earlier. Once I jailbreak my device for app security testing, how do I get access to the app data to see what's being stored? That's a great question, and there's a couple options there. First, I'll give you the more difficult one. You could do this manually through Cydia. So if you remember, when you jailbreak a phone, that Cydia app gets installed, and you have to install a couple different packages. One is OpenSSH, which will basically allow you to remotely connect over SSH through a terminal window to the device and basically navigate the file system from that device. A less manual option, probably easier for those that don't have Linux background, is to use, we have a free viaLab Community Edition. So viaLab is our application security assessment tool. And basically this viaLab Community Edition will let you connect your phone, and assuming it's jailbroken, and let you read the files from the phone. It does a couple other tests as well, but basically it will do some automated keyword searches to see if any sensitive data is stored in that app folder that I talked about. So there's definitely the manual process that you can do if you have that background and that experience, but viaLab Community Edition is also an option. Let's see here. Another question is, my device is jailbroken and I'd like to upgrade to the new OS. Will the jailbreak stay in place? The short answer is no. A simple update to your phone will not work if it's jailbroken. We've run into some issues in the past there where what we've found to only work is to basically do a restore through iTunes and update your phone, and that essentially removes the jailbreak. If you need a device to remain jailbroken but you wish to update your operating system, you always want to check to make sure that there's a jailbreak available for that version that you want to upgrade to. As an example, when iOS 8 comes out, let's say you did a quick update the first day it came out, well, some of the jailbreak tools are going to be behind. They need to catch up. They need to wait for iOS 8 to be released in order to figure out how to best support it. So there could be a delay in whether or not it's supported. And so if you want your device to be jailbroken, always wait until there is a jailbreak available for that version you want to update to. Okay, and a third question here is, why do certain apps limit your ability to use them when your phone is jailbroken? Another good question. As Kevin mentioned, my team does a lot of our mobile app security testing, and one thing that we look for is if the application is doing what we call jailbreak detection. So essentially, this is going to be a business decision. You know, if you release the banking app and you say you only want your app to run on non-jailbroken phones, well, that's going to limit your customer base. So ultimately, it's a business decision, but we do occasionally see this when doing our app security assessments. It can be doing something as simple as the app checking to see if that Cydia.app is installed. If they see that the Cydia.app is installed, they could shut down their application and prevent it from running. That's a very, very basic way of doing jailbreak detection and something that can be bypassed just by renaming that Cydia app folder, for example. And so we see varying levels of complexity with jailbreak detection, ranging from, you know, taking us 2 minutes to bypass to maybe several hours to bypass.
So the next questions coming up were those that were submitted but were not able to be answered live. And so we're going to cover those questions that were submitted right now. The first question was, are there forensic tools that can bypass all security locks? In other words, the passcode on all versions of iOS. The short answer to that is no. Currently, there are no tools available to get past the passcode on devices running iOS 4 and higher. So really the only way around this is obviously to get the passcode somehow, or if you have access to a computer that was ever synced with that device, you could do an iTunes backup without knowing the passcode, but again, the chances on that are slim. So unfortunately, though, no, there is nothing out there right now to cover the latest models. The next question that came in was, do iOS devices conduct wear leveling and garbage collection as in the Android world? And if so, is it basically the same process in both? The answer is yes. Both wear leveling and garbage collection are features of NAND flash, and this does apply to both the iOS and Android platforms. Just to give a little bit more background, the idea behind wear leveling and garbage collection is to extend the life of the devices. So each time data is deleted through garbage collection, it decreases that lifespan. And so by nature, these devices try to keep old files and data around until they actually need to be overwritten in order to free up more space. And so this is why we're able to recover deleted data through file carving techniques. Although I did want to point out again that on iOS, since Apple's been doing file level encryption in iOS 4 and higher, we're no longer able to access some of those deleted files through file carving methods. Next question is, what is viaForensic's experience with regard to undoing or restoring cell phones after jailbreaking a device? So undoing a jailbreak nowadays is really not an easy thing to do. You'd have to basically connect it to iTunes or in some other way do a restore and update it if there's an update available. So it's not like you can just delete the Cydia app and it's gone. There's not really an undo process without updating the phone itself. And the last question we have that was submitted was, what is your experience with defense when returning an iDevice that was jailbroken for forensic process? This is a pretty common question that we get, and really what it comes back to is the differences that I highlighted throughout the webinar when you compare the jailbreak methods for the earlier devices with the jailbreak methods now. For the earlier devices, as we mentioned, it would affect that boot RAM only. It didn't touch user data. So we felt confident in explaining that it was not affecting the user data. And on top of that, all of the forensic tools that would perform physical acquisitions on these earlier models were essentially doing a jailbreak in order to get that access. You just didn't see it because it was being done behind the scenes. So again, the differences between the earlier models and the later models. The earlier models, we would be able to do basically a temporary jailbreak, and when you restart the phone, it no longer applied. With these later models, you know that the jailbreak is applied at the kernel level or at the operating system level, so it does actually touch that user data partition. I would just want to make sure that if you ever decide to use the current jailbreak methods to get access to an evidence device, that you have a very good reason for doing it. For example, you know that you will get a file if you jailbreak and recover data from the phone that you wouldn't normally get through a backup or through a logical acquisition. So I think as long as you have that reasoning behind it and you can explain why it was done and how it was done, then you really shouldn't get too much pushback.
As you see on the screen there, our next viaTalks, we run these every single Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time. So you know, if this is something that you are interested in and you find some valid and valuable content, you know, please register for the next one and join. Tom Anderson, he's our team lead for our viaExtract product. He's going to be discussing the new viaExtract CE, which is the community edition of our forensics tool. It's very, very neat. There's a lot of things that you can do with the community edition, including logical backup acquisitions. I believe it will do a file system acquisition as well. And thanks again to Katie, as well as everybody that attended for today's viaTalk. Hope to see you next week.